Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today I want to show you how to set up an indoor propagation area. This is a place where I'll be taking cuttings from outdoors, sticking them here, keeping them under lights and in a controlled environment until they root, and then I can get them back out in the garden. What I've heard from some of my viewers in the past is that although they love my greenhouse and time mist setups, that's not really something they can achieve in their own backyard, not that easily anyway. Whereas something like this is something you can set up in a basement room of a house or a spare room. That's what this is. It's just a basement utility room that I'll be setting up for propagation because I want to do some more propagation this year. You will have seen me use some of this stuff before. So these humidity domes down here, I used last year in my video on lavender and on rosemary, and some of the things you'll see me use are brand new. I have some new stuff to show you in these boxes here. Speaking of which, you will have seen at the very beginning of this video, above my right shoulder, it said that this video includes paid promotion. I just want to clarify on that all that's happened here is that VivoSun, which is one of the larger sellers of horticultural equipment on Amazon, has sent me some products for evaluation. So that's what I'm doing. I thought they would be useful for this video. All right, let's have a look at the room. Before I get to the specifics of the setup, I just want to show you this downstairs utility room we've set up. That door leads to outside, and of course there's a sink there. So when I bring my cuttings in, I have some place to wash things off and clean up. A working table here, and of course a bunch of my horticultural supplies that have just happened to land down in this room. Now I've taken some tables, or I should rather say that Lisa made some tables for me and set them up in the middle of the room. So I have a nice big working surface. I intend to cover this whole thing with cuttings. There are some additional pieces over here. We have some fans and I have a heater. It is really this time of year, this season, I shouldn't really need to use heat on these benches or at least to heat up the entire room, although I will be using a bottom heat or a heating mat to improve the stick rate of my cuttings. As you've seen me use these domes before, I already have some Fremontodendron as cuttings there and some seedlings as well that I started this spring and just haven't had a chance to move out. And the rest of this room, I will say something about the temperature because this is a basement room. It stays relatively cool in here. Oh, there's the dog. And it does stay relatively cool in here, so I should get a nice stable amount of temperature in here. And the other thing about this spot is that it is bright. We do get some outdoor light that comes in. It's not so much direct light landing on the table here, but it should add some just basic light. But I'll be using this post here, and sorry, I'm gonna just go up here, to mount lights that I will need so that I can have artificial light across these benches. So let's start out with a discussion on temperature. I want to get into specifics here of temperature because it is actually one of the primary considerations for your success in rooting cuttings. And right now I'm closing up on, this is just a thermometer and hygrometer that was sent to me by VivoSun. Yes, I am featuring their products. But I thought it might be instructive to show you. Across the bottom end of this display, you'll see the temperature it is in this room. I mentioned that this room is cool, and what I mean by that is it's cooler than the rest of the house. Down here, it kind of averages between 65 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the equivalent of about 19 to 21 degrees Celsius, which is kind of towards the bottom end of your propagation range. Now, I find that desirable because it's a stable, good low temperature that I can work with. It's easier to raise a temperature than it is to lower it. So if you're talking about my greenhouse, it could very easily in the day there push past 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which I guess is somewhere above, say, 32, 33 degrees Celsius, and that is really a little bit outside of the optimum temperatures for propagation. Propagation temperatures optimum range might be somewhere below 85 degrees Fahrenheit or 29 degrees Celsius. So you're looking for about a 10 to 20 degree raise in Fahrenheit from these base temperatures. You'd love to be in that range between, say, 77 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a good temperature to get. And it's easier to start with a lower temperature like you have in a basement room in the house and then raise it than it is to work with a higher temperature and then struggle to lower it. Now what I have here on this base station is, again, this is the temperature here, right where this base station is. This one here, it has these temperature probes that you can place in different positions. This one is inside of one of my humidity domes already, right over here, just to the left of your screen actually. I'll zoom out. Since I have video, I may as well use it. But it's sitting inside of that humidity dome there on top of a heating mat, and has been for, say about a half hour. And it's raised the temperature up to 75, 76 degrees Fahrenheit and 78% humidity. So inside of that dome, it's a much more favorable position for propagation, for rooting cuttings, than it is just in the room itself. One other thing I'll show you is it has remote stations like these where I can give you the temperatures outdoors. And outdoors, it's at 61 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's actually significantly cooler outside than it is inside this room here. So one of the advantages you have when you set up in an indoor room is that living temperatures are relatively close to the bottom end of propagation temperatures, and then you can adjust them from there. Which brings me to my next part of the setup, which is this Seedling Heating Mat. And that's also made by VivoSun. It's larger than the ones that I've seen locally anyway in the store. 48 inches long, 20 inches wide, which means it fits 4 seedling trays or 4 cutting trays side by side. The standard 10-20 trays, it'll fit 4 of those easily. If I'm using one of my humidity domes like this, most likely I'm only going to fit 3 side by side, but nevertheless, nice big area to work with. Now this does give you that 10 to 20 degree Fahrenheit boost from ambient room temperatures. That's what it's designed to do. So that's actually going to be perfect for my growing space. Why is bottom heat so important? It's not just the same as adding ambient temperature, I have to say. If I just turned on the big room heater and brought it up to those propagation temperatures, raised the temperature in here by 10 degrees or 20 degrees, that wouldn't be the same as adding bottom heat to the soil. The plants just respond better to a warmer soil and a lower ambient temperature. So you'll actually improve your rates of cutting or your rates of sticking just by adding bottom heat rather than adding ambient or whole room temperature heat. Now let's talk about humidity, and I've shown these before in my videos, but if you're new to my videos, you may not have seen me use one of these propagation domes or humidity domes. It's made from a storage bin. So the way you'd find it in the store is something like this. But what I've done with it is, of course, I use it upside down, and I've drilled some holes in the top here. And I figured this is actually about the right balance. Just 3 small holes, 1-inch holes, that allow some of the humidity to escape from the dome, but I can also cover those. If I want a little more humidity in there, I can actually cover those to get the mist up on it. The reason I'm using these for my indoor setup as opposed to outdoors, I use a timed mist. And the reason I'm using these is, of course, because it isn't practical to use a mist, an irrigation system inside here. So what I can replace that with is that when I first put plants in, I use this. I could throw, with my little hand mister, I can throw a little mist on the inside of it. And now I have some humidity on the outside of the bin, and then the soil moisture actually holds it. So I usually don't have to add mist like this all the time. I come back once a day or so and I check and I see whether there's still sweat on the outside of the bin, and if there is, I don't do much. If it's starting to go away, then I add some mist. So the way this will actually be set up, like I say, is I'll put the base down here, I'll put the plants inside, and I've put that, sorry, I'm just going to show you here. This is the edge of that Seedling Heating Mat. I've got 2 other bins on there. And so then I fit it on there with the plants inside. so that it looks something like this. And that's the basic setup. Remember, these are the Phromontodendron that I started last week. Some of them are still a little bit on the limp side, but I have seen some callus on some of them as well. And I'll be adding some roses to my propagation today. So I have a surface, I have temperatures, I have humidity. So most of the factors of growing my cuttings are dealt with, but what about light? And that's where this comes in. So you can see I have some natural light, of course, and then I've also mounted along this post above the tables is additional supplemental light. This first one, sent to me by VivoSun, actually draws about 200 watts of power. And what I like about it is the wide profile. It actually covers a long length. For those who are accustomed to starting seedlings under fluorescent, I like the length of them. I like the coverage that they give, and that's where this one really shines. It's also a really high efficiency feature. So for 200 watts of power, I'm getting the bang for my buck. In addition to that, I have the Spider Farmer one over there, which is about another 100 watts. So altogether, I have 300 watts of power. That's going to factor in a minute when I talk to you about how I have to supply power for this. But then the question becomes, how long do I run these for? And what distance from the plants? Now I've gone with the manufacturer's recommendations of hanging this about 30 inches away from the plants, and the Spider Farmer one about 24 inches away from the plants for their stage of growth. Now, as for how many hours I'm running them about 9 hours. I'm going to run them for 4 hours in the morning before it gets really hot in the room down here, or before the sun really has a big effect. So in the morning from 7 to 11 in the morning. And then I take a little break, and then I start it off again at 4 o'clock at night, and I run it until 9 at night. So altogether 9 hours of supplemental light. Now, to tell you the truth, I'm not exactly sure that that's the right balance, but that's what I'm starting with, and I'm going to see what impact it has on the plants. All right, I have to give a quick word about electrical capacity, and I know that's a boring and weird subject for a growing video, but I have to do it because if I'm talking about setting up an indoor grow area, this power here is coming from a wall outlet to this one power bar here, and I have 3 appliances set up to it. If you've been following along, this one here goes up to the Seedling Heating Mat, or the heating mat, and this one timer over here runs both of the lamps, one from either side. So is that too much? Well, here's the math on a 15 amp circuit, is that you can generally have, or I guess your theoretical capacity is about 1800 watts of power drawn, although I think electricians say you should try to limit yourself to about 80% of that for safety. So it's about 1400 amps that you should be able to fit onto a single circuit. The VivoSun grow light is about 200, the Spider Farmer grow light is 100, and the heating mat is another 100. So I have about 400 watts of power drawing from that one circuit, and there's nothing else going to that circuit right now. So I'm well within capacity. I only say that just so that people don't get nervous about the how much power is being drawn, and it is something you have to think about when you're setting up an indoor growing space or propagation space. Well, here I am, more than halfway through the video, I figure, and we haven't even shown me handling any plants or dealing with any cuttings, and that makes sense. The first thing you want to think about is setting up your growing environment, and then after that, you can go out to the field and collect your cuttings, which is the step I did just before this. Out in the stock field, I have mother plants of roses. Of course, you can use your garden plants as the mother plants, and I just did a rough cutting and brought them in. Now, I want to talk for a second about the rooting hormones, because in the past, you've probably seen me use Stimroot, which is just a rooting hormone in a powder. Probably the equivalent in the US would be Hormex. That's something I've used in the past with good success, but as you know, I always like to experiment a little bit. So I've got a new product here. This one's Hortus IBA water-soluble salts. It dissolves into water, and what I've done is I'm using the long soak method here. I'm just trying to see if there's any chance that giving them a longer soak in a lower concentration of solution will improve my rooting over time. And these ones have been soaking since yesterday. So that's what I'm using. Now let's look at the soil and the cuttings and how I set those under the domes. These are the trays that I'm going to be cutting into. This one here is a 32 cell plug tray that's just been loose filled with some soil. And over here I have some pots. These are 3.5-inch pots that also have been loose filled and then put into a tray. The interesting thing about these trays, these nursery trays, this one here and this one here, whether it's a plug tray or whether it's a tray holding pots, they tend to be about the same size, 10 inches wide and about 20 inches long. That 10-20 size makes them very standard. So when you're designing your benches like this, you can set them up to be, well, 20 inches wide, like this table is, and it will fit them perfectly alongside each other. Or you can choose your domes, like these ones here, and just making sure that inside of it, it will snugly fit the 10-20s, you're in great shape. The soil itself, I'm not going to go into great detail on. Suffice to say, any kind of a free draining potting mix is really what you're after. You're not looking for a ton of fertilizer in there. It should be moist when you put it in there. What's available to you will vary from market to market. So I've made other videos on potting soil. I can link one up above here. But ultimately, what you fill that with isn't quite as important as how you treat it. If it's a free draining potting soil and you manage it with the right level of moisture, that is barely moist, not soaking wet, then you should have a decent amount of success. And I do recommend a potting mix over natural soil from the garden or compost for reasons I have discussed elsewhere as well. Now let's talk about the cuttings here. Now I went out to the field and I collected a whole bunch of cuttings last night. And like I say, I had them soaking. At the time that I was out there, I went ahead and clipped them with my Felco pruners. I trimmed the stems, but I left a lot of leaves on them. And as I put them into a plug tray like this one here, they may start to interfere with each other if they have a whole ton of leaves on them. So just before I put them in, I may do an additional trimming step, and I'll use something like this, these little trimmers here, to just pull off any additional leaves that may interfere with each other for space, and then just sticking it like this. In a small plug like this and cutting this size, I will probably go 1 cutting per cell. If I'm using a larger pot like this, most likely what I will do is I will stick them as 2 cuttings in the same pot. And then that leaves you the issue later that if both succeed, then you have to separate them out or divide them out from the pot. But it does give you double the chances, and that you're not wasting the soil space, because there's 2 chances that your roses will root rather than just 1. All right, and here it is all trimmed up. You can see I took off some of the excess foliage there, and here's the tray all finished up. Probably other professional propagators would have no hesitation to pack them a little bit tighter than this, but I like to leave a little air circulation between the foliage. And of course, I should note that I tagged it as I went. A very important step. If you've done any amount of propagation, you know what a pain it is when you forget to tag a plant, much less a tray. And here they are with a little bit of mist on them. I'm ready to put them under the lights. I thought I'd give you at least 1 shot with the lights on, as glaring as that can be. And then I place the humidity dome on top, trying not to catch any of the cuttings as I do that. But it fits fairly well. And you can see that the condensation on the inside of the dome is there, and that's what I'm checking for when I come back here to look at this over the next few days. If I see that condensation on the inside of the dome, then I know it's got enough humidity. I can also check that humidity sensor. And speaking of which, here it is now at 78 degrees and 82% humidity inside of the dome. So that's pretty near perfect as far as I'm concerned. Thanks for joining me today as I set up my propagation room for the season. For me, this is when the fun really begins. I'm going to fit as many cuttings as I can into these domes and rearrange them around the tables so they get maximum usage of this lighted space. What I'll also be doing is doing lots of little experiments on that lighting routine, on the different kinds of rooting hormones that I can use, the different stages of wood that I can cut from. So this will be my, my pleasure to do over the next few months, and I'll probably share some of those results in videos with you. If you have any questions about how to set up a propagation room or about propagation in general, please drop those in the comments of the video, and thanks once again for watching.